the heart of Texas.
It's Thursday. We are 18.2 in the notes. If you have any questions about the review questions you were supposed to do yesterday, let us know. Otherwise, as long as you've got that stuff done, you're on the right track. Tibbetts and I are here to help you. So whatever you need, just let us know. Today we're going to get into 18.2. Your assignment for tomorrow, which is Friday, was to do the review questions for this unit. And then Monday, we will get into 18.3. Cool? All right, here we go. So at the end of 18.1, we talked about the Medicine Lodge Creek Treaty and how both sides of the agreement broke it and in which ways they did. So after it was signed, some Native Americans remained on the plains, refusing to give up their way of life. Reports reached Fort Sill in Indian Territory. Now remember, Indian Territory is just Oklahoma, okay? Talked about that during the Civil War. We colored our maps. Indian Territory is just Oklahoma. The settlement raids are still happening. In comes General William Tecumseh Sherman, travels west to investigate these claims. Sherman and other officials believe that the reports of Native American attacks were exaggerated. He was touring the western part of Texas when about 100 Native American fighters left the reservation in Indian Territory and crossed into Texas. Okay, May 18th, 1871, when Sherman was at Fort Richardson, they attacked a wagon train traveling along the same route that Sherman had just taken. During the attack, natives killed 7 people. 5 did escape, though. The attackers returned to the reservation with captured mules and supplies. Sherman ordered federal agents to question Native Americans about the Warren wagon train attack. Satanta, who's a Kiowa leader, admitted that he helped lead the raid. Sherman ordered Satanta and 2 others, Big Tree and Satank, arrested and tried for murder. The 3 leaders are taken to Fort Sill, taken into custody. On their way, Satank tried to escape and was killed. Big Tree and Satanta were found guilty in a Texas court, sentenced to be hanged. Satanta told the court all of the issues and the problems the Native Americans were facing on the reservation. Remember, the end of the bargain that the Americans broke to provide supplies, provide food, provide protection. He kind of brought all those issues to light, and Governor Davis worried that executing the men would cause a war. So instead of hanging them or sentencing them to be hanged, he just gave them life in prison. The Kiowa ended the raids, and 2 years later, the leaders were set free. Satanta, however, took part in more raids and then was arrested again. He took his own life in prison just 4 years later. The reason this is important is the Warren wagon train raid changed Sherman's attitude towards Native Americans. He knew that the peace policy didn't work. He feared that it was not going to work. And his next move was to order U.S. troops to pursue Native Americans not on reservations and destroy all of their camps. In the early 1870s, U.S. troops began operations against those natives who were not on reservations, again, in the Americans' eyes, breaking the law. Colonel Renault Mackenzie was given command of a force charged with driving natives from the plains onto the reservations. In the summer of 1871, Mackenzie led troops into the Panhandle to pursue Native Americans. Mackenzie pursued a group of Comanche led by Quanah Parker, but lost them in a storm. In 1872, Mackenzie's troops fought the Comanche and defeated them. By 1873, Mackenzie, due to his efforts, the raids had declined. Mackenzie then focused his efforts along the Rio Grande in South Texas. The army attacked the Apache and Kickapoo villages. For several years after the attack, South Texas had entered a time of peace. The buffalo, also known as the bison, was the main source of food and other goods for the Native Americans of the plains. We talked about that before when we talked about the difference in nomadic and sedentary tribes. Your nomadic tribes are chasing the buffalo as their main source of food. It was the way they made their shelters, and they depended on the buffalo and hunting of the buffalo to sustain their life and their livelihood. So they did use every piece of the buffalo, and that was kind of the claim to fame of the Plains nomadic tribes, was that they used every piece for something. The stomach could be turned into a soup kettle, bones were turned into weapons, sewing needles, sinews were turned into thread and bowstrings, and the skull was used in religious ceremonies, in addition to the fact that they used the hide to make clothing and shelter. They used the meat, obviously, to eat. In the early 1870s, white traders in Texas began to make large profits from selling buffalo hides. Using rifles that fired bullets, hunters slaughtered millions of the animals in just a few years. For natives who depended on the buffalo for food, shelter, and clothing, those few years marked the end of their traditional way of life because it marked the beginning of the end of the American buffalo. If you look on your screen, there's a picture detailing pretty much everything that they turned into, or everything that they made out of the buffalo hide, carcass, meat, everything. So pause the video, take a peek at that. Some settlers in Texas were sympathetic to the Native Americans and understood the importance to the buffalo, to their way of life. A law protecting the buffalo from rapid slaughter was proposed in Texas because this was a mass extinction level event. The U.S. government thought that the slaughter of the buffalo was an important tactic because if they killed all the buffalo, that the remaining nomadic plains Native Americans would be forced onto reservations where there was scarce amounts of food, but food nonetheless, rather than staying on the plains where there was absolutely no buffalo to hunt. By 1877, very few buffalo remained in Texas, and those Native Americans who wished to stay off the reservations found it very increasingly difficult to do so. As the natives grew more frustrated with their current situation, they increased attacks on settlements out of pure anger, looking for supplies, looking for food, and just as kind of a retribution type tactic. If you look at this next picture, is a mountain of buffalo and bison skulls, just from a small region in Texas. This isn't even this is every buffalo killed in the United States. No, this is just a picture of one place in Texas where they had piled up buffalo heads. Same here off of a rail car. You can see bones, skulls, pretty much a massive cemetery of buffalo bones. And then that next picture is going to be buffalo skins, hides. So pause the video, take a peek at those. Following the vision of a Comanche medicine man, Quanah Parker planned a surprise attack on a small camp of buffalo hunters in the Panhandle. The medicine man promised victory, predicting that the bullets would not harm any of the warriors. So in June of 1874, Quanah Parker led a group of 700 fighters. There were 28 buffalo hunters. The hunters survived the initial attack with only 2 casualties. Over the next 2 days, they only lost 2 more. The natives pulled back, having suffered significant defeat. Frustrated by their loss, natives increased their attacks in West Texas, and in September of 1874, a band of Kiowa and Comanche attacked 2 scouts and 4 troopers during the Buffalo Wallow fight. Every man was wounded. 1 trooper was killed. After that attack on adobe walls, President Grant put the Army in charge of Native American affairs in West Texas. Native Americans were required to register on reservations. There were 4,000 that did not register. Those unregistered Kiowa and Comanche moved into the canyons of the Panhandle. Okay, remember, we've got a kind of Palo Canyon lies in between the plains of Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and then start to get to the Rocky Mountain terrain in New Mexico, Colorado. So you have a canyon out there in Palo Canyon. So they set up camps with 1,200 warriors ready for war. General Sherman's plan to destroy the roaming bands involved the advance of U.S. troops against Native American camps in the Panhandle from 5 different directions. Army officers hoped they could trap the Native Americans in canyons from which they could not escape. Many Native Americans camped in Palo Canyon. In September 1874, Colonel Mackenzie led a cavalry unit down the steep canyon walls. U.S. troops surprised the natives, burned several villages, and killed more than 1,000 horses. The loss of the villages, supplies, and horses crippled the natives. With little chance of surviving the winter, most agreed to move to the reservations. The last band of Comanche, led by Quanah Parker, surrendered in 1875. Central and West Texas are now mostly safe for settlers. Many more quickly moved into the area. Natives were rarely again seen on the Texans' plains after that. So that's it for 18.2. Okay, short and sweet. Make sure you get those review questions answered. If you have any questions, shoot us an email and let us know. Hope you guys are still doing okay, staying inside, taking care of your schoolwork, finding time to relax and hang out. So tomorrow, Friday, remember, just answer the 18.2 review questions. As long as you've got all that stuff done up until now, you're good to go. Okay. So have a great weekend. We'll see you guys on Monday.